All right, everyone. Welcome back to another edition of our Friday podcast. I have with me Lizzie Keegan. Lizzie is on staff at USC in South Carolina. Lizzie, welcome, and would love to give you a chance to introduce yourself.
Thanks. Glad to be on this podcast. Like Zane said, I'm Lizzie, and I'm on university staff. I've been on staff for 10 years, and I went to JMU. I was going to say with Zane, but before Zane, but
Just a little bit.
Just a little bit, but we both love JMU. So, I live in Columbia, South Carolina, obviously, and I think university staff is the best job in the world.
Awesome. That's great. So the conversation that Lizzie and I are going to have is about community under quarantine. We're all in a pretty unique situation right now. I know that officially today, Durham issued a shelter-in-place order, so I'm not supposed to leave my house except about. Well, I don't plan to. I haven't left in 7 days, so I can't imagine their order to do that is going to change what I've already been doing. So yeah. I'm just a little bummed that I can't go play golf, but it's all right. One day I'll be able to play again, and it'll be a glorious day. So I'm going to ask Lizzie some questions, and we're going to share with you guys some of our thoughts on what does community look like during a really strange and unique time for all of us. So Lizzie, how have your normal rhythms of friendship and community been disrupted? And what have you been doing to stay connected and find community over the last few weeks?
Yeah, as a single woman in my 30s, I live alone. And so disrupted, they've been completely disrupted, all my rhythms of life. I mean, like most students, I think I'm still gathering with my small group from church digitally. Even though we're in the same place, there's too many of us to be, CDC legit or whatever. And so I just feel like I've really had to get creative with connecting with people and realize that I can't connect in the ways that I'm used to, in the ways that I normally want to. So I, in the last week, have reconnected with so many friends I haven't talked to in a long time. I just feel like there's something very unique about the fact that we're all going through this. That's like, I had a video call for 2 hours with my group of friends from high school on Sunday. Oh, wow. One lives in Italy. We never have time to all talk, but the 5 of us were like, I'm not doing anything. Yeah. And calling, different friends from the past, long distance friends. I've been, in a practical sense here, I have a neighbor that we eat dinner on our porch every night. So I live in a duplex, and so she sits on her porch and I sit on my porch because she just traveled, so we're not getting near each other. Yeah. And we eat dinner and we talk. And I've been going on walks with people, safely distanced walks. So yeah, just trying to I think at first I was like, I want to maintain normalcy. And then I have in the last couple of days realized, okay, this is not normal. And so I want to learn what relational connection I need and how I can get that in some different ways while also looking forward to being in normal relationships again.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, that's awesome. I think it feels similar for me. I'm not single, so I have Kara here with me, most nights, but she actually is considered essential personnel. So she still has to go out to work each day, which is good for us from a financial standpoint, but a little scary for her health and things like that. I think for me, as someone who's generally pretty resistant to technology, the idea of having to connect with people virtually is not something that I was super excited about. I will say that my connection with the small group that I lead with the sophomore guys has been really fun actually over Zoom. It's still, I'd much prefer to be with them in person, but we've figured out some fun ways to connect. So, but yeah, it's difficult. It's difficult to have to route everything through technology when I don't really want to do that and have actively resisted doing that in most of my life up to this point. So I can understand the disruption a little bit. So assuming that these recommendations of social distancing remain in place and knowing that students won't be coming back the remainder of this semester, what do you anticipate being the hardest thing that you personally will face as it pertains to community and friendship? So what do you think the hardest thing that you're going to have to face in the next couple of weeks and months is?
It's hard to pick the hardest thing, because it feels like there's a number of levels that are hard. I think there's um, the grief and loss of things we were excited about and things we were dreaming about doing. Um, I was just kind of thinking yesterday about the fact that a lot of us live life by being excited about the next cool thing we're going to do. And we get through the monotony of life and classes and responsibilities by being like, but graduation, or but this trip, or this fun thing. And right now it's like, I mean, maybe Christmas will be the next. No, I hope I'm kidding, but I mean,
Yeah.
we'll see. So I think just allowing like sadness for that and continuing to be like, oh, that's another thing we've lost, another thing we've lost. I think for me, really practically, and I know, students will be in different situations, obviously, but I think the loss of physical touch feels really significant for me. And I'm not a physical touch person. I'm actually like, yeah, not a super touchy person, but I think the reality that I haven't been like hugged in 2 weeks and I don't know when I will be again is like, wow, I've just been struck by how like we were made for face to face. Like we were made for touch. We were made for human interaction. And I definitely feel like sitting 15 feet from my neighbor and eating is not normal. Like this is not what I was created for. So I do think that'll continue to be hard and sad in a lot of ways. And then I think so I am an extrovert and feel like I have found ways to connect with people one-on-one, but I think the other loss going forward is for me is kind of is group experiences and what you gain from a group experience that you don't get one-on-one. Like one-on-one, you can still hear how someone's doing, you can still encourage them, you can still confess, all these different things. But it reminds me of that C.S. Lewis quote where he talks about when one of his friends died, he didn't just lose that friend, he lost the part of each of the other friends that person brought out.
Mhm.
And so, yes, we have like video for small groups and those kind of things, but it is not the same as being a group of people in person and being like, oh yeah, like that person and that person connect really well, or that person makes this person laugh in a way that's just weird. All these like just really special group experiences that we're really just not going to have for a long time, which feels very strange.
Yeah, I think the thing that I've been saying is I think I'm going to miss the extra time. Like I can mimic my discipleship time and my small group, but the times that I would run into you in the dining hall, or the times that I would see you after large group and just catch up, or the dynamics before a meeting starts or after it's over and people are hanging out, like that's gone. Like that in a lot of ways, like we don't get that for a while. And that feels like a cost to me that I'm not excited to lose. So yeah, for sure. Um, all right. So moving away a little bit from us and more towards our communities and towards the ministry, how can our communities continue to pursue the Lord together when our routines have been disrupted?
I think one of the primary things is maintaining personal time with the Lord daily. And I think uh, for some people, that's going to mean scheduling it in for the first time ever. I think time with the Lord and daily time in scripture and prayer and just sitting with him is something that we talk about and we maybe know is part of following Jesus, but can be kind of like a hard learning curve to start doing. And I've been thinking about this time as actually an opportunity to put that into our schedules and to make that a priority. Because I think when we're on campus and we have to be at class at 8 a.m. and things like that, it can feel hard to like, where do I put this into my day? But it's like now we have essentially wide open schedules. I know some people have to go to like video versions of their
Right.
classes, which is weird. But
Yeah.
for the most part, we have wide open schedules. And so really prioritizing, okay, this is the chunk of time I'm going to spend every day with the Lord. And maybe as a small group talking about like, hey, let's all read through the Psalms together during this time. I say the Psalms actually because there are places of praise and lament, which we need right now, and because it's long. And
Yes.
I actually would encourage reading something like that right now because of the uncertainty of we don't know how long this is going to be. So yeah, just prioritizing that daily time with the Lord. And I think it'll reveal to us what actually stops us from spending time with him. Because I think one of the primary reasons I hear people say they don't spend time with the Lord is I don't have time.
Yes.
And so now you've got all the
Can't say
time.
that anymore, right? Yeah, you
That
got
can't
time.
be the reason. And so, yeah, what a beautiful opportunity to really like if we started spending time with the Lord consistently every day, maybe 30 minutes, 45 minutes every morning, by the end of this, however long this is, that's going to be a habit built into our systems. And
Mhm.
that doesn't even count like what the Lord will actually do during those times. That will also be a real gift to us. So, yeah.
Yeah, I love the recommendation of Psalms too, because they tend to be so emotive, right? They're just stirring up these deep emotion that the psalmist feels as he writes, and so I like that idea. You're gonna experience negative emotion during this time. That's normal. It's human. And so what does it mean to actually take that and to offer it to the Lord? And the Psalms really paint a really clear picture of what that can look like in a variety of ways, right? Both positive and negative. And I appreciate that a lot. Yeah, one of the things that I've suggested too is considering doing something like praying the hours. So if it feels like the monotony of your day, just kind of you're like, okay, well, I'll do quiet time at night later, and then you just keep pushing it and pushing it and pushing it, and then you're just like, I'm just going to go to sleep. Maybe try praying specifically throughout the day, even if it's short, but pray at 9, at 12, at 3, at 6, at 9. So that your time with the Lord is dispersed throughout the day. And share all of this, whatever you choose to do, with your small group, with the people that you have community with, even with your families. Like, talk about what time with the Lord looks like with your parents and with your siblings, if you're at home with them. Talk about something besides coronavirus with with the people that you're spending all of your time with. And
Yep.
what better thing to talk about than your time with Jesus?
Yeah. And also,
Um, yeah.
if I could just make a plug. That's a very weird thing to say. Make a plug for prayer is what I was going to say. I know you said praying the hours, but I have just felt consistently through my church communication, through InterVarsity, through my boss in InterVarsity, just this invitation to more prayer because
Mhm.
we have more time and a major crisis. So it's like I have just felt so struck. I have it right here on my table. I ended up just like having a piece of paper that I'm just adding prayer requests to because I just feel overwhelmed. I just feel like every day there's more stories that are painful. Every day I remember someone in healthcare that I know that I want to pray for, or I remember someone else in my life who is vulnerable to the illness. And so just keeping this and like being able to, like you said, take breaks throughout the day to pray and to be like, yeah, I feel so aware of the fact that I am not on the throne
Yep.
of my own life, much less the world right now. And so, what can I do in that desperation? I can turn to the one who is on the throne. So, yeah.
That's great. Yeah. What suggestions do you have for how to break up the monotony of video calls and virtual hangouts? And maybe are there different things that we can try, knowing that we just can't see each other in person right now?
Yeah. I laugh because I'm like, I am figuring that out. We are
Yep.
all figuring that out right now. Um, I think for me, really practically, I'm actually keeping my one-on-one meetings with people shorter, so that we have less screen time, and then just making sure it's happening every week,
Yep.
just so that we're not all staring at our screens all the time. I think the value of being outside, um, getting that vitamin D and like walking, and actually I just realized people probably live in a bunch of different places. I live in a place where it's pretty beautiful right now, but
Mhm.
uh just trying to get outside, do different things. I think okay, I have never been a person. I am a people person. I want to hang out with people. That's all I want to do. For the last week, I've just desperately wanted to do a puzzle.
Oh
Like,
yeah, Sarah's been that way too. She ordered 3 off Amazon.
yeah, I borrowed a puzzle from a friend the other day that had never been opened, so no germs. And I'm just like really excited about doing this puzzle because, and I'm like I said, not that kind of person, but I just realized I think there is this desire in me to do some things with my hands, to do some things where I'm not looking at a screen. So I think a few things would be, I would set time in your schedule where you're going to do your schoolwork and do your intervarsity calls, and then do not be on your computer outside of that. Like for me, I'm working until 5 every day, and then I am closing my computer and not opening it again. Trying to have boundaries with your phone, um, so that you're not always on your phone. And yeah, of course, during this season, we are all gonna watch some Netflix. People are probably watching movies with their family and stuff, which is great. But one rhythm for me that I made like a special rule of life for, which is like just basically daily rhythms
Mhm.
for this time because it's so weird. And one of them is like a list of things I could do each night that are not with a screen. And so it's like puzzle, a book, cooking, like cooking a meal is one of them, going on a walk, all those different kind of things. I think I love the creativity that is coming out of just the collective world right now about like, do this online workout class and do this online thing. And I think that's awesome. And I think we have got to step away from the screens, like for many reasons, including like headaches, like even the basics of like, this is not normal and good. So those are just a few practical
Yeah,
ideas.
for sure. Yeah, I think I've intentionally tried to not watch like my gym's workout videos. I get the workout. I'm like, okay, I'll do that, but I'm not gonna watch this.
Yeah.
I look at the screen too much. I'm just gonna do it without the video turned on to give me some sort of break. One thing I would suggest if you find it difficult to be intentional and connect with people because it feels like everything is just this one-on-one kind of really deep intentional conversation, and I think sometimes we elevate that and we're like, oh, that's so great. But like, that's not normal relationship either. There's just going to be moments that aren't about the most deep thing going on in your life. It's just going to be, yeah, we're just hanging out. We're occupying space together. Um, you could consider setting a time with your small group or something throughout the week where you're just like, I'm just going to log on to the video call from 12 to 2 and just be there. And I'm going to be doing homework or I'll eat lunch. And if you guys want to talk and be in the space, great. But we're not doing it to like have a one-on-one, like, okay, how are you doing? Tell me everything you're feeling and processing right now. But it's just to kind of make up for that extra time that you don't get because you usually would have seen them in your suite or in the dining hall or after large group or whatever it might be. Now we don't get that. So what does it look like to just schedule a time that's not meant to be scheduled? We're just going to do this. We're going to just hang out on this video chat. And yes, it's weird. And yes, it's like I'm sitting here eating lunch in my house and you're eating lunch in your house and we're pretending to be eating lunch together. Whatever. I think that that's something that I would say is to make sure that not every time you talk to someone uh, feels like it needs to be this really serious, like, okay, tell me everything that you're doing, catch me up on everything in life, but it can just mirror what would have been dinner on campus with friends, you know?
Yeah.
So that's one idea too.
Yeah, I think along with that, I've been encouraging people to not um, maybe use what are most naturally their technological connections of texting and Snapchat. I've been encouraging people towards FaceTime and the phone, which, like you said, can feel like, oh, it's got to be this intense conversation. But I would encourage us to embrace the short phone call.
Mm,
Like, I mean, a lot of us just don't like the phone at all. We're like, ugh, phone calls feels weird. But just embrace the like call and say, hey, how are you? How's your day? Like I called a friend of mine yesterday who's also single and lives alone and just left a voicemail like, hey, thinking about you, whatever. They
yeah.
called me back, left a voicemail. That's, just ways to like connect in small ways that, like you said, don't have to be so intense, but aren't, uh, I think texting is great. Snapchat, kind of great. Uh,
Yeah.
but I think we've got to move away from the things that are like, in this time, we have to use the things that offer the most connection,
Sure.
not the easiest connection.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I find that I'm actually pretty good at those short conversations with my dad because my dad is really annoying to text with because he's not good at it. So he sends stuff that doesn't make any sense, or it's just
Uh-huh.
like you said something kind of important, and he's just like, okay, and you're like, that doesn't help me. So I just started calling him for 5 minutes, and those conversations are actually like pretty refreshing. So I really like that idea.
Yeah.
How do you think we should react and respond when we begin to feel lonely and isolated, as many of us will in the coming weeks and months?
Yeah. I mean, I have already been dealing with that personally as a strong extrovert who lives alone. Um, I think when we are isolated, and like right now, what's weird is that normally in life, when we feel lonely or feel isolated, sometimes that's not true.
Yeah.
But it's like right now, when you feel isolated, it's because you are isolated.
Yeah.
And as great as these video calls are, as great as phones are, it will not fill you with what you really need. And so, first of all, just like giving yourself some grace and saying, like, I don't need to beat myself up for feeling lonely. Like,
Mhm.
this is a very lonely, isolated time. Uh, Second thing would be to take that to the Lord and cry out to him. I feel like in my time with the Lord in the last 10 days, I mean, it's like he was sovereign. He knew what I would be reading during this time. It's just been this repeated theme of I am with you, I am with you, I am near to you, has been in everything I've read. And
Mhm.
just receiving, like, okay, yes, I feel alone or am alone, but the Lord is with me, and letting him show you more of his presence and himself in that moment. And then it is so easy when we are isolated or feel lonely to isolate more. I'm someone, uh, to be honest, who struggles with like relational insecurities and those kind of things. And so, in these moments of the last 10 days where I have felt lonely, I can play games in my head about my friends and my community and different people. Oh, they might be annoyed if I reach out, or I'm becoming this person, or they're not as lonely because blank. And I create a narrative in my head that they don't want me to reach out to them. Um, and that's really, I think a lot of that is the evil one perpetuating those lies. And so I think the other thing to do, besides give yourself grace and go to God, is to go to a friend, is to kind of uh, fight that lie that you're hearing with the truth that just because you're far away, you still have friends, you still have community, and those people want to hear from you. And just reach out to someone, even if and that could be that you do one of those short phone calls, or you quickly reach out to someone and just check in. Or it could be more of like, I mean, I went over to a friend's house last week and just said, like, I went over there and we walked in her neighborhood, and I was just like, I am incredibly sad today, I feel incredibly lonely about thinking about doing months of this.
Yep.
um and she was just able to be like, yeah, that sucks, I'm so sorry, and like, I want to love you through this, so I think just it feels a little bit obvious, but I think it's harder than it sounds to let people in when you're lonely.
Yeah, and I think but that's one of the tricks, right? What you just said, of being able to express that feeling of loneliness and sadness and not have someone be like, okay, how do we get you back to happy? And I feel like so much, even the stuff that you see on like Instagram and social media platforms now, of people and celebrities in particular, like responding to this, it's always like, let's be positive and like, let's put out things that will make you get back to happy. Negative emotion is not, it doesn't signal that something's wrong. Like the perfect state is not happiness. What it's signaling is that this is something to mourn, that you actually have lost something, and that it's okay to feel um, that sense of loneliness or isolation in this time. Now, the choices you make out of that is something that we need to control and be aware of. And you can't, and like you said, you got to break that spiral. So if you feel yourself spiraling into more isolation because of that feeling, I'm isolated right now, and you're going to let that narrative play out, figuring out a way to break that, to put a stopgap measure in place and be like, I'm going to call this friend when I notice that spiral start to happening. I think that's the thing that needs to be done. But part of it is understanding that neutral doesn't mean happy. Like you don't always need to get back to this place of being like, I'm really happy right now. That's not normal human life. There's just things that we should mourn. And right now there are things to mourn, and that's okay. It doesn't mean that something's wrong. It does mean that we're responding to the brokenness around us, and probably an appropriate way. So yeah, I really like what you said there.
I would also look for, like, what are the triggers of the loneliness. Like, some of it might just be my life is different and I'm not with my friends and I'm not around many people, um, and that's totally fine. But I think some of it, like, can be triggered by being on social media too much and those kind of things. And then I think another thing for a lot of us, a lot of students who, this rest of the semester is out and are having to be at home with family. And for some people, I'm sure that feels fine and comfortable, but for some people, that's a pretty difficult space to be in, and it's going to make negative emotions worse. Um, and I've been thinking a lot about people who don't have great home lives and normally spend their summers out somewhere else, like away at a camp or working somewhere, and are actually stuck in their homes with their families of origin. And so I would encourage you, if you're in that situation, to have like a specific person, hopefully someone in your small group, who you can call in those moments when you're like, okay, if I sit in this dynamic too long, I'm going to get to a really dark place. Call them, go on a walk and call them, just kind of being able to, I mean, that is even more vulnerable than sharing about our families in small groups. Like, to actually in the moment say, like, I am struggling right now because of the way my family is treating me or the way the dynamics are. So it's scary, but I think it's really worth protecting yourself from getting to a pretty dark place.
Yeah, that's awesome. What role do we as the body of Christ need to play in helping those around us feel connected during this current health crisis, particularly our non-believing friends?
Yeah, this is, I think, like many things in life, is a opportunity for witness in a unique way. And I think we're, like some of these other things we've said, are all figuring out kind of what it looks like in this time. I think uh, as lonely as you feel, your non-Christian friends likely feel way lonelier. Because what I'm finding, I'm trying to ask a lot about this, but even your friends who seem like they have a lot of, even your non-Christian friends who seem like they have a big social group, or maybe they're really involved in a club. I know InterVarsity is being real serious about meetings and video calls. I'm finding that a lot of clubs are not. A lot of clubs have just sort of ceased existing, which makes sense because they're not on campus. But your friend, so as lonely as you feel, I think they feel way, and because they don't have the presence of the Holy Spirit with them, bringing them comfort. And so you get to actually be that presence, the Holy Spirit in you, empowering you to reach out to them. Call them on the phone. Like I said earlier, don't just text. Call them on the phone, FaceTime them, check in with them. I'm finding also that, like, everybody, and I'm talking, college students, university people, I'm talking friends here, my neighbors, everybody wants to process how they're feeling right now. People are not necessarily sure how to do that, but this could be a beautiful opportunity with some non-Christian friends who you feel like, well, we're just in this class together, or yeah, they just live on my hall, to have a much deeper conversation with them because of the circumstances, where you get to speak some truth to them and you get to talk about your experience. And I think one of the reasons this is hard for us, I think, well, there's a number of factors, but I think we are experiencing, as the body of Christ, so much uncertainty and worry that it can feel like, I don't know how to talk to my non-Christian friends because I don't have like a happy ending for them.
Yeah.
And this is where we have to, as believers, be like, yeah, in this world, we will have trouble. We will have trouble just like everyone else, but we know the one who has overcome the world. We know the one at the end of this. Like, everyone else, their hope actually lies in the day the CDC lets us live life normally again. But we actually have a living hope, a hope that is long beyond that. When we go back to sports and we go back to campus and we go back to life and those things don't satisfy, we have something that actually will satisfy, that does satisfy. And so you get to, like, tell your friends that, and you get to tell them, like, yeah, and I'm struggling to believe that that's true.
Yeah.
Neighbor who I have dinners with is not a Christian, and it's been really interesting to get to share with her, like, to get to let her into my fear and my sadness, because I think sometimes we think about sharing the gospel from like a happy place, but there's a beautiful opportunity for the gospel to go forward in suffering, and the way that the Lord is with us in that.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing that I keep coming back to as I study and as I talk to people is you're talking about the gospel, which doesn't begin in this place of like everything looks good and it's all going to be rosy from here on out. It actually starts in a place of profound darkness. It starts with betrayal and and execution and death. And so if you're know people who feel like they're in the midst of suffering right now, we actually believe in a God who profoundly sees them in the midst of their suffering and relates to them in that, because he chose to be exposed to that for them and for the rest of us. And so there's actually great hope if we know the gospel well within it, to say, yeah, Jesus isn't just the one who overcomes suffering, he's also the one who experiences it. And so when you feel like you're alone and no one sees, he does. He actually does. And yeah, I just revisiting that first point you made, I like just the amount of work that it takes for people like me and you to run a ministry or a club virtually. Like the amount of work that we have to do in 2 weeks to just keep things running somewhat normally during this time is a lot. So if you think that a student run organization is going to keep operating as normal, it's probably not. And it's not their fault. It doesn't mean that they don't have a good organization. It just means they had a unique purpose that was connected to being on campus, and that's gone because campus is gone. Jesus isn't. So we keep meeting and we keep talking about the importance of community. But I think what that means is that even your friend who got 1,000 likes on their Instagram post yesterday might not have had a real conversation with someone from school in 2 weeks. And so if you aren't thinking about them and how you can reach out and care for them during this time, I do think that we're missing an opportunity. And so, yeah, I would just encourage all of us that we who have been blessed with communities who are being intentional and are reaching out, we still have a responsibility to exist for the rest of campus and to be thinking about them even when we're not directly around them during this time. Okay, my last question is, what are some things that we should be wary of as we seek out community in the coming days and weeks? What are some things that we need to be aware of and on guard against as we try to pursue community in this unique way?
Yeah, I think that prior to this quarantine, it felt like there is fake community via technology,
Yep.
and then there is real community in person.
Mm-hmm.
And I think one of the things we have to be the most careful of is now there is real community and fake community on technology,
Yep.
through technology, and that's going to be hard to navigate. That's also going to be hard to come out of, but we'll talk about that in a couple months. But just realizing not all virtual connection is real connection, though you can have real connection virtually. And so just plugging again, having boundaries with your smartphone, having boundaries with social media, that it can, like, being on Snapchat, being on Instagram, like seeing what people are up to can feel like, I'm connecting with them. But that is not the same as someone, even through technology, telling you what they're doing and sharing it with you and talking to you about it.
Mm-hmm.
So I think just making sure that, like, the difference between knowing about someone and knowing someone, the difference between our InterVarsity staff always said the difference between being researched and being related to. Make sure you don't get into just rhythms of looking at social media and learning about people. I also think it is crucial in this time, obviously, to connect, to be vulnerable, to move towards one another with technology. And I would be, how do I say this? Like, watch your own, like, comfort level with being vulnerable with a screen rather than with people. And I'm not saying that to say don't be vulnerable, but what I don't want us to do is get into relationships in small groups where we are all of a sudden, because we're behind a screen, sharing things we've never shared. And then when we get back, we don't know how to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's sort of yes, continue to meet with your small groups virtually, obviously, and call people one-on-one, FaceTime people one-on-one from your small groups. But if you have friends where you live, I think still making sure you have some face-to-face interaction. If it's going on a walk or going to a park or something like that, maintaining your feet of distance, just so that I'm nervous for us that we're going to become so comfortable
Yep.
with online community that we're going to think it's actually better.
Yeah,
Um,
I mean, I think of like you see, if you spend any amount of time on YouTube, you see people who like get on YouTube and talk about really vulnerable things, and they're like, I just really like appreciate this space to be vulnerable with you guys, and I appreciate all the support of this community. That's not a community. They've responded in comments to a video you made that they don't know you, and so that idea of like, what does vulnerability look like? It looks like uh, our willingness to step out and to share, and then allowing people to normally respond to that,
yeah.
to respond to that in a way that actually would cause interaction, and not just with a comment that they can edit and kind of say exactly what they mean to say. So yeah, I really agree with that and think that that could be dangerous. The other thing I think of is I logged on to Facebook or whatever on Sunday to kind of find our church's live stream, and there's 8 on my news feed of like, this church is live streaming and this church is live streaming and every church in the world is live streaming right now. And I even saw comments of people like, yeah, this is so great. I can watch like 3 of my favorite pastors all on Sunday morning, and I can like be like church hop in a way that I never could before. And it's like, yeah, but you're not actually a part of anything. You're just watching, and consuming is not the same as community.
Yeah.
So if this is an opportunity for you to just turn to consuming content, then I think that you've missed it in some ways. We just encourage you to spend time with the Lord, and your pastor's thoughts and other pastors' thoughts on how to do that and on scripture. They're good things. Like I have no issue with you watching some services, but don't confuse that with connection and community. The body of Christ is something that we are meant to participate in, not something that we just look at from behind our own screen. And so I would encourage you to continue to go to the church that you normally go to. And I know go to seems like a weird word here. But yeah, the bouncing around, I don't know that it's going to do you much good during this time. And make sure that you're pressing in to connection with actual people that you're talking to and having a relationship with.
Yeah, I am a little nervous. Like, I think our churches are all going to technologically advance in some significant ways because of this. And I hope that we all realize that that is not better than worshiping together in person. Like, just like we know that small groups via video chat are not as good as small groups all in the same room. The other thing I would watch out for, I've noticed this in myself, is that I sort of all my worst sin patterns are coming out relationally. I find myself less patient and more insecure and more sensitive, and so therefore quick to, maybe be rude to people or think the worst of people.
Mm-hmm.
And so just like giving yourself some space to name, oh yeah, these circumstances are bringing some things out in me that are not great. And so watching for that in your friendships, watching for in your relationships. Yeah, like, because if we're both kind of lonely and not in a great place, that means we're going to feel that in our relationship. And so how can we name that and be honest about that and move through that? Because I mean, I'm not trying to be pessimistic, but I do think some of that is going to get worse the longer we do this. The more we're going to be like, I mean, I know this is true of this, like, you miss golf. It's like, we don't have sports. Like, I think the amount of like it, just how irritable I feel that there aren't like sports to check in on is like, I mean, that's revealing some idolatry there too. But yeah, just watching for some of that irritability and impatience in yourself, and kind of confessing that and turning away from that.
Yeah, awesome. I want to give you a chance to share any closing thoughts. My closer would just be, we have said for a long time with UNC InterVarsity that we're a small group based ministry, that our ministry really is focused on community and connection, both to one another and to the Lord. This, while it presents challenges, it also is an opportunity to see if we really are what we said we were. If that's true, then while this might be inconvenient, we do have options to continue to be intentional, to continue to seek one another out, to figure out what community looks like under these circumstances in a way that we never could if our main focus was on connecting through events and just kind of existing in the same space 2 or 3 times a week. So my challenge for my students and for anyone watching this is the time to be intentional, to seek out community in a way that you maybe didn't have to before. The convenience of things is gone. It's not convenient anymore. But what are we going to do? Not only to connect, but also to be careful about the ways in which we're connecting so that we're not allowing real connection and real community to be replaced by something that just feels easier. And so, yeah, those are just some of my thoughts. So just a challenge to now's the time to be intentional. And that this isn't the first, it might be the first real shaking experience that many of us have encountered, especially students who don't really remember things like 9/11 or weren't really old enough to process 2008 recession and stuff like that. But this is not the first pandemic or global crisis that the Word of God has endured. It's seen much this and worse, and so we can trust in that during this time. So yeah, do you have any closing thoughts for us, Lizzie?
Yeah, I think that's always a good reminder for me that God is not surprised by this, and that church history has been through terrible things. And I think you and I are both pretty oh, if I have to use technology for ministry, I will, but it's not my favorite thing. But it is a good reminder too that people have been talking a lot about the 1918 flu, or was it, yeah, Spanish flu pandemic. And it's man, they didn't have the opportunity to connect. There was not the ability to talk to one another. So being grateful for that. I think the other, closing thought would be, well, first of all, as small groups, especially for all small groups, but especially older students who are grieving this being the last semester, not having that time on campus, actually remembering that this is actually preparing your small group to stay in touch after college in some cool ways. And again, I would rather us be on campus. Doesn't feel worth the trade to me, but it's a cool way for us to realize, oh yeah, our small group does exist outside of campus. Our small group, these relationships go beyond that, both in geographical space, but also in time, that you want to keep these relationships after college. And then the other thing I would encourage you is so much of your time is going to be in these group classes, which sound terrible, praying for you guys in that. And then a lot of time in small group meetings and a lot of different group things on video. And I just want to encourage you again towards the one-on-one, towards the one-on-one calls, one-on-one FaceTime, making sure that you are connecting with just one other person, because that I think especially helps it guard against what you were talking about with the consumer mentality. When you are a full participant in the 50-50 conversation of one-on-one. So yeah, those are some of my last thoughts. And I think the Lord, just a reminder that this time is hard, but the Lord will use this for his kingdom. He will take what was evil and use it for good.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Lizzie, thank you so much for being with me today. Hope that all of you can engage in some conversation around some of the stuff that we talked about with your small groups, maybe even with your families. And we will see you next week.